Hello, we'll talk about a very interesting architect from Italy, Mario Ridolfi, born in 1904 and died in 1984. Um, I value a lot Mario Ridolfi, and I will try to explain why. He was born on the 5th of May, 1904, and died in November 1984. So he was born in Rome into an artisan family of construction, construction workers from 1918 to 1924. After completing the lower schools, I don't know, well, I guess, yeah, the first years in school, he worked for an engineer while at the same time attending the evening schools with a special focus on building. In 1924, he enrolled at the Higher School of Architecture in Rome after having won the architecture scholarship. In 1929, he graduated with a project for a marine colony in Castel Fusano near Rome. You'll be surprised by the architecture of this architect. Ridolfi's design activity began in the 30s when he began to work participating in the many competitions with which he wanted to design the new Rome of the fascist regime until he won in 1932 the one for the Nomentano postal building in Piazza Bologna, which you are going to see, an emblematic building of Mario Ridolfi. The building is one of the most significant examples of Italian rationalism, like the other two Roman buildings for housing units in Via di Villa Massimo and Via S. Valentino Colombo, and the Bordoni Technical Institute in Pavia, in which the collaboration of Konrad Wachsmann is recorded. Ridolfi's training, however, is due to the path it followed and the environment in which it developed, linked to tradition. And this is very interesting. And that is the reason I wanted to present this architect, because he was a modernist architect, but sending somehow a subtle clin d'oeil towards tradition. Even if open to the modern movement as he was, which constitutes the almost temporary form of expression, a variety in the definition of space architecture. I don't know, this is probably a translated language, a translation from another language, and it is not excellent, and I apologize. After the war, he would fully adhere to the defined current of architectural neorealism, which is aspire to reinterpret the values of the past, its techniques, materials, and architectural details in a modern way. And that's exactly why I think Ridolfi is so interesting, because he was a modern, but he didn't really divorce what we call the past. The symbolic representation of the neorealist doctrine is the intervention in the Tiburtino district in Rome, which involves Ridolfi and Quaroni, another important architect between 1949 and 1954, together with a certain ideology of the Casa that marries well this vision of architecture linked to ethical and social issues of the place. Of the same architectural value are in the same years the Ina Towers in Viale Ethiopia in Rome. We have to make an excursion to Rome after this. Casa Palota and Casa Chitarini Interni, among the most representative works created in the heart of the historic center of city. And, you know, I even lived and worked for a while in Rome and I didn't see them. But this was the man, Mario Ridolfi, thick hair, which I envy, since I don't have hair at this point, and I don't think I will again. I have very little. Anyway, as a younger man, and drawings of this man who drew incessantly, but very differently from Carlos Scarpa. This is the plan of a house. Well, it's not just the plan. You see also the elevations. And I like the fact that he shows, you know, elevations or sections or details on the same sheet of paper. And well, in this case, the approximate roundness of the building, you know, almost invites even more so to do something like this. But you see, these are almost illustrations. I mean, they are illustrations done freehand and at the same time very rigorous in the sense that he shows details. He, you know, describes, you know, particular aspects of the building. I like his manner of drawing, and I like his architecture. You see, on the same drawing, he shows details. So I would say this manner of doing projects is very sustainable. You eat up less space. You know, you save paper, and you show a lot of things. Often, so this sort of thing is not done any longer. And Matt, who is here, knows the working drawings, you know, of details, for example, are separated from plans and sections in general, but he places everything here, including some kind of a conceptual vignette, like you see here in the lower left corner. Another plan of a house. So now we only show some drawings by him. This one we saw. As you can see, he was a great craftsman. I mean, he drew, you know, details very, very accurately, very precisely, and he probably invented here. They were not copied from, you know, books. Here you see also, you know, showing how to make something, you know, that is a door. We see even some kind of a little perspective on the left. A very interesting draftsman, I would say, Mario Ridolfi. You know, freehand drawings, but very, very, you know, detailed. He was maybe some kind of an artisan architect, if I can call him so. But this reminds me of what Walter Gropius said, and set it as an ideal of the Bauhaus at the beginning, to bring together the artisans, you know, the craftsmen and the artists. And he said both the craftsmen and the artists were rooted in craft. The only difference between the craftsman and the artist is that the artist is an exalted craftsman. Otherwise, they are both rooted in craft. And, you know, this is almost a medieval conception. And maybe it's very valuable, and we should maybe return to it. Fontana dello Zodiaco, the Fountain of the Zodiac in Piazza Tacito Interni, 1932-1936. So, you know, it's a modern fountain, as you can see, but the theme is not modern. I mean, you know, in 1930, can you imagine, you know, for example, Le Corbusier making a fountain of the zodiac? I don't think he would have done it. But I like it because it is connected with allegory, with symbolism, with metaphor. What else is the zodiac? You know, and now he didn't invent the theme itself, but he created a modern fountain for you know, the zodiac, Mario Ridolfi. But this is not in Rome; it's in Terni. And here I see, I think it is during some kind of renovation. An early work by Mario Ridolfi. Now I regret I didn't try to meet him, because on that year when he died, at the beginning of the year, I was in Rome. Edificio postale di Roma. This is his most known work, you know, called the rationalist, Italian rationalism building, the postal office in, I don't know, Nomentano is maybe the area in Rome, 1932. And this is it. And yes, it's modern. Is it a rationalist building? Well, that's how it was described on Wikipedia, but this could be also seen, I mean, very closely to the architecture of Alvaro Siza, for example, in the present. If this would have been described as an Alvaro Siza building, I would have believed it if I didn't know it was built by Mario Ridolfi almost 100 years ago. A fine building, yes. A very big postal office, if you ask me. Maybe not as big, not as monumental as some works in the United States by Kevin Roach, by a work by Kevin Roach, a postal office, which looks very, very impressive. Anyway, this is impressive too in a different way. The drawings, modern through and through, and you would say, what does this rendering, this drawing is not, it's almost a rendering, I mean, but not quite, because it's, anyway, what does it have to do with the sketches we looked at the beginning? Well, not much, perhaps. Here there is a more resolute modernity, both towards outside and towards the inside. I keep saying, I mean, look at the telephone there on the desk, and then look at the space of the room. The room is, you know, it could have been built today, but the telephone shows its age. And sorry for the resolution. I hope here you can see them better. The plans with the stamps of the officials who approved it and to be built, and it was built. It's a good building by Mario Ridolfi, although he has another side, a more romantic and artisanal side, so to speak, which we are going to contemplate as well.
I wonder what Corbu would say about him.
Yeah, I wonder too. Now, the fact that he uses the same window, I mean, there are only two types of windows, one on the ground floor and another one on the next two floors. Yeah, in this sense, you could say, you know, it was Italian rationalism. Tomb, Tomba di Enrico Lattes, 1934, no pictures, sorry, Istituto Tecnico Bordoni in Pavia. Here again, clearly modern building. Casa del Balilla Potenza, 1933-1937. This is very puzzling to me that the Italians who are, you know, known as being, you know, temperamental and lyrical and, you know, romantic in a way, the Italian rationalism was you know, a significant movement, if I'm to call it so, in Italy. So how is it that the Italians, you know, are connected even with rationalism? It's almost like a paradox, but maybe not. Sometimes the contrary is meet. What is this? No, Palazzina Colombo. It's an apartment building. You know, it has several apartments. Well, because of the vegetation, we could say it could have been built in the present. It's an apartment building, a block of flats, maybe nothing glorious about it. But at that time, when was it built? 1937, 1938, just before the Second World War. You know, I guess this architecture was rather, maybe the influence of Le Corbusier began to assert itself. A block of flats. Building in Casa Civile in Milano, 1938. No pictures. Quartiere Ina, Casa di Terni, 1949. Another block of flats. But even in this building, you see, is that part of the narrow facade of the building that is rotated at 45 degrees and, you know, creates you know, a little bit of a distortion there, or no, not distortion really. You know, an accidental, a little rebellion, formal rebellion, so to speak, the diagonals of the turned at 45 degrees balconies. Case Lucioni, also interni Casa Lucioni. This one, I would say, is symptomatic of Mario Ridolfi because it appears to be crafted at a different time, not in modernity, like some of the buildings we saw previously. They were kind of distanced from what we call tradition. But here, you know, I like him very much actually for this kind of work because it's, if there is any modernity, it's very subdued. And look at the drawing. I mean, the drawing itself is enigmatic, and not just because of the resolution of the picture, but that's the way he drew, atmospheric drawing. And I wish I had more pictures with this building because I like it. But it was not so easy to find pictures, you know, on the web with him because he's not so well known. I mean, he is well known, but he's not a, you know, brilliant star. In anyway, Casa Chitarini. Here again, we see the rebelliousness of the balconies that you know, even Bjarke Ingels in the present used. I mean, you know, in the recent past, actually, you know, he has a famous apartment building where the balconies are triangles that you know, seem to try to escape from the you know, the monolith of the building. He plays, you know, rather innocently. You say nothing so interesting, you know, but there are subtle things. The balconies, you know, show a certain level of innovation. So he has an architecture which is not aggressively fractured from what we call a certain past, but then he has small interventions, like in this case, the balconies. If you study them in detail, you see that they are not banal, actually, even though they are not, you know, extravagant in any way. Mario Ridolfi, an interesting architect, I would say. Casa Cerignola, I don't know if I pronounce well, probably not. These are also interesting, I would say, because they are, if I am to compare them, for example, with similarly, you know, no, similar, in a way, buildings by Oud in the Netherlands, here we see touches of an Italian sensitivity, you know, like the oblongs, wooden oblongs. So it is a modern architecture, but it also has elements of maybe even of the vernacular to an extent. I like the ambiguities, and also he didn't reject ornament. You see the you know, the parapets of the balconies. I mean, this is something that the Orthodox moderns simply would reject totally, but not Mario Ridolfi. And I think this betrays a particular sensitivity, which, in my opinion, is to be encouraged or even applauded. I'm not so sure about these stairs, you know, which don't have a, you know, a large horizontal surface at the top. I guess you could fall from these stairs if you are not careful trying to open the door. This is not advised by Ernest Neufert, but he did it. Maybe he could have done it differently, you know, if he turned the stair, you know, around and attached it to the wall. I guess it didn't matter to him. Maybe a little bit of living dangerously that Nietzsche advised us to do is right there. Interesting architect, I would say, Mario Ridolfi. If you see this picture, you say this could be maybe in Central America, or even a third world country, maybe South America. But no, it's in Italy, in Rome. I don't know if it is in Rome, but it is in Italy. Another block of flats, we saw it. I guess it's in the same area with these buildings. Even this building, it's a banal block of flats, but this narrow side elevation, something. It is architecture. I mean, sorry for putting it so bluntly and so simplistically, but it is architecture. When you walk on the street towards it, you say, yeah, it is architecture. Another building from the 50s, 51, Casa Tiburtino. This is also interesting because look how he gives access to the apartments or the houses from this prolonged exterior balcony or corridor or passageway, which offers some drama to the facade of the whole thing. Otherwise, the buildings are almost so-called traditional. I don't think he did this building, but I don't know. Maybe he did this one as well. I know these row houses are by Mario Ridolfi. They are here, I guess, unless I'm mistaken. Anyway, I like buildings which have personality, but a discrete personality. So you don't even know if, they almost appear to be anonymous, but they are not. Viale, Ethiopia, in Rome, these are tall buildings, apartment buildings, and I think these are also very well done. I mean, they are apartment buildings, but let's see. They do have character. They are not banal blocks of flats. You can tell that there was an architect here who thought about aesthetical matters. And you look at the roofing, it's not a rajardin, it's not a flat terrace. And it would have been very easy to arrive at a complete failure because, as you know, it's very difficult to put a sloping roof on a tall building. But I think he did a good job. And, he has vertical windows, not the paradigmatic horizontal window that was promoted by the moderns. So I guess he was an architect who had his distance towards mainstream modernism. And I like him for this very reason. And not the only reason, but for this reason as well. So he was some kind of a black sheep. And look at the interior. What architect of modernity would use such a parapet, here? Now, and there are still unconventional architectonic or design gestures, like this piece. We can call it, furniture. The supports. And then you have this, you could say, traditional treatment of the parapets. But then you have the whitish plain surfaces. So it's the ambiguity that attracts me to his architecture. It's modern, but not quite modern, or not totally modern. So I guess he built all these, for eight blocks of flats. I even like this fact here that it's almost like a dialogue, a silent dialogue between these two buildings. They approach each other, but they do not touch each other. So it's a way of connecting without really connecting. You see in the side plan, and it's just in one place here. I guess there is something else here, but I don't know if you see my arrow. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And they do belong to Rome. They do belong to, you know, you can tell this must be in Italy. Mario Ridolfi. What is this? Another Palazzine Zaccardi in Rome. Now he only did the top part, but it shows to us that Mario Ridolfi was also capable of some provocative gestures. You know, he built a building on top of this existing building, which clearly didn't try to mimic the architecture of the below. So he, despite his reverence for the past or tradition, he was also capable of iconoclasm, as we can see here. From this side, it looks different. It almost looks like it's a different building. I'm a little bit confused. Maybe it is a different building. Or seen from the other side. That's possible. No, I don't think. It might be a different building. Another block of flats. A little bit surprising, no? Because I don't know, it has something almost of Rudolf Steiner somehow. I feel tempted to say in Messina. I miss Italy now. That when I look at these buildings, I feel like going to Italy right now for some reason. You know, these buildings were not built with a lot of money. They had social concerns, you know, after the war, they needed badly housing after the devastations of the Second World War. But they employ skillful architects. Again, with the balconies, he brings sensitivity to an otherwise almost banal building. And also the canopy, what happens at the top, the superior part of the building. What is this? Also in Rome, a villa. This one is also is interesting because actually he built this, I am to call it a villa, on top of a real villa. You know, it's like you know, some gestures which are now very fashionable, like Su Fujimoto built in California, a village on top of another structure, an office building. He even proposed something like this in Paris. But look, Mario Ridolfi did it much earlier in 1955, 1956. When you look at this, you could say this is a building in a village, but it's actually in a city built on top of a bigger building, you know, much bigger building. Interesting. So again, he was unconventional also, not just a follower of the, you know, submissively of the past. Another, this one in Napoli, no pictures. Treviso, Napoli again. Terni, sorry, no pictures. A school. I like this school very much. In fact, my interest in Mario Ridolfi came into being when I discovered this school that was published, I think, in a magazine in Controspazio, I think, in Italy. I like it because of its rurality. It's like a rural building, and maybe it is in a rural area. But I like very much the fact that it has oblongs, it has wood, it has brick. It's very humane, very human, in the good sense of the word human, and also I would call it rather, you know, sustainable, if I am to use a fashionable word. The plan, sorry, I hope I have better pictures of the plan. Sorry about the resolution. There are pavilions now brought together, and a view from the inside it makes me think a little bit about the Jewish bathroom that Louis Kahn built in New Jersey, the Trenton bathroom, public bath. Both the plan, although the one by Louis Kahn is symmetrical, here is an asymmetrical configuration, but also the interior. Yeah, the structure, the exposed carpentry work reminds me of that work by Kahn, and also an early house he built that was almost abandoned and destroyed. I think a good work by Mario Ridolfi here in this school. Sorry, I don't have great pictures, and I'm infuriated towards myself because I guess I couldn't find, when I made this presentation, I couldn't find, I should have searched harder. The school is actually on the lower left corner of the picture. In my opinion, a good work by Mario Ridolfi. And again, ornament is not rejected. And I think ornament came back to architecture lately, to the exasperation of the Orthodox moderns who, you know, were very vehement against the ornament, although both Adolf Loos and Miss van der Rohe used ornament because they used a marble which was highly ornamental, including in the Barcelona pavilion by Miss. But again, here is very interesting, I think, this work by Mario Ridolfi. You know, it's again, it shows a certain duality. It is different, the base, the ground floor, aesthetically from what is happening at the top. I really think Ridolfi deserves some study. And even here, you understand how the building was built. You know, he didn't hide the stonework or the brickwork, but he's also playing with these materials towards aesthetical goals. And I also see echoes of what Stephen Hall would call, you know, not perforated, but I forgot the word. Not perforated, but in a sense perforated. Sorry, I'm getting old. I'm beginning to forget things. Another good work by I almost said Stephen Hall, although this architecture has nothing in common with Stephen Hall, except the why don't I remember the word? It's not. It's about perforations. Oh, what's the word?
Transparency?
No transparency. No. Anyway. What is this? Carcerari di Nuoro e Cosenza. Apartment buildings. Can you believe it? They working with octagons, and you know, they stand out, and they are not. They are almost you know, depictions of urban utopian images of you know, cities in the vision of the artists of the Renaissance. And here you have this, I mean, even the octagon itself is an intriguing geometrical figure. And he built these, should we call them towers? They are not really towers. They are not so tall, but they are taller than the buildings around, based on an octagonal porosity. My God, I'm definitely getting old. I was thinking about porosity because Stephen Hall was advocating the cause of porosity in architecture. And I think in this image, we see some approximations of what porosity might mean. That is this frontier between the inside and the outside, or between, yes, two zones of the building, that through this frontier that is has porosity. In other words, it allows for some communication. Well, it's not transparency, but it includes meanings of the word transparency, yes. But this is also an interesting work, I would say, because it is informed by history, it is informed by tradition, but somehow he's able to not to simply copy what was in the past, but bring back from the past into the present. So this is a cultured architecture, but I wouldn't call it eclectic. No, is very well made legitimate by this architect who knew what he was doing. Maybe I didn't say something very interesting. Now, another building in Terni. This is one of his most intriguing houses that he built, and I would consider it almost a manifesto for his architecture. Here are the drawings, but this is the building. You know, it's a building that you see the plan. You know, it's there are distortions of a geometrical figure. There are rotations. There are slight deviations from the perfection of the geometrical figure. There is an approximated roundness through geometry, and then there is the roof. And here again we see, I would say, a very fine sense of using materials, not in a very, innovative way, perhaps, but he integrates everything somehow into an interesting building. And again, vertical windows, oblongs, wooden oblongs. Maybe you say this man, promised us to talk about architecture, or avant-garde, and he shows now clearly a nostalgic architecture, because in a way this is a nostalgic architecture. But look at the plan. The plan is not. But I mean, it's interesting. Here we see the octagon of Vignola, since we talked about Vignola, right? And you remember that building with the the round courtyard, and in Caprarola, and then we see another. He superimposes another geometrical figure that I'm trying now to, is not so clearly defined like the pentagon underneath. So there are two figures, two geometrical figures, one rotated above the other. And I think the plan is rather interesting, and is dynamic and also static. And I like very much the tectonics of his architecture. You see clearly how the building came into being, how it was built. You see the parapets of the stair that are done, as without great ambitions towards doing something astonishingly new. He has these rotated elements, which create, a little bit of movement on the facades, and then you see the rows of the blocks that compose the masonry walls, and again the oblongs, which I think are important in his architecture, and they are important in Roman architecture in general. I like it. I like this house. It's modest but distinguished. It's both urban and rural somehow, and I like the fact that it's halfway between the urban and the rural. And I like the drawing as well. Well, maybe I need to find even better drawings. I mean, not better drawings, but better images of the drawings. I even like the fact that the way he squeezed, you know, the elevation and the section through the building, you know, in this way. I mean, how many architects would do something like this? He did it. And, you know, the section even goes beyond the, you know, the frame of the drawing. It breaks away from it, and so does the plan. There is a certain level of spontaneity in this drawing, and I guess it was used as a working drawing, because I see here detail with dimensions and so on. Interesting architect, in my opinion. Is known in Italy, but not so known outside. And now the bathroom, it even has some surrealist qualities. It is a modern bathroom with modern fixtures, and still there are some things here that are a little bit unsettling because of these rotations with a 45 degrees angle. Very interesting. And this is even more interesting because in 1968, this architect, Mario Ridolfi, anticipated works done in the present using parametry and all the rest. But it was in 1968. So 32 plus 23, you know, almost 60 years ago, this is what he did. And he did it manually. I mean, why did he need the fluidity of the line, the curvature at the outside? Why did he complicate himself? I think it's a great drawing, pencil drawing, and this is the plan, kind of reminding us of the house we just saw. But this is a motel, I guess a motel. No, yeah, a motel. It was not built, unfortunately, but it would have been very nice to build because he anticipated even to an extent the towers that Med architects built in Canada at the beginning of the you know, creative activity. Now we only have these drawings that were burned, you know, and even the burnt parts of the page somehow contribute interestingly to the image. And this is the model of the motel, Mario Ridolfi. Silently, I think he anticipated certain things that happen now. There is an organic quality. Also, I would be curious what not only what Le Corbusier might have thought of him, but even Frank Lloyd Wright. When I think of the Price Tower by Frank Lloyd Wright, and now we look at this, you know, moderately vertical building for a motel by Mario Ridolfi, which in plan is almost, you know, as if made in the Renaissance, you know. But it's not a perfect, this is what intrigues me and attracts me, that is not a perfect geometry here. There are slight, you know, deformations. Lots of drawings, but you see here the slide, well, not so slide because the rooms on the right side, it appears to be like a, you know, centralized building, perfectly centralized, but it's not. I mean, it is, but here the rooms are much smaller than here. So, you know, this is interesting because the centrality of the plan and also the symmetry would make you think that what is here on the right side should also be on the left, at the top, and at the bottom, and it is not. And you see the below floors, which are, you know, eccentric. Interesting work, truly a creative work, but it didn't come into being, it was not built. The reason, maybe I didn't explain very well what I tried to say. There is stability, there is even the idealism of these geometrical figures that he operates with, but then there is also a slight instability. So is this marriage between stability and instability, which I find, you know, I appreciate it very much. But it was not built. You see it here in the, in the site plan in red. All done manually, of course. Mario Ridolfi. Probably he worked alone on this, without draftsmen, without an office and whatever. Maybe he worked alone. That's what I imagine, that he did the whole project alone. It would have been very nice if it was built, but it was not. What can we do? Sorry, the pictures are a little pale, but that's how I found them. Each floor a little bit different from the previous ones, and at the same time similar, but not identical. So he needed difference. He needed, a differentiation. Although in spirit they are the same, and in form to an extent, but they are not identical. Now, why did these pages have a conversation with fire? I don't know. He worked a lot. I think he was ready to build it. Could it be that he burned these drawings with the fire of his passion? I know it sounds rhetorical, almost pathetically so, but I wonder. Maybe he was smoking, a heavy smoker. This is the book on him, Mario Ridolfi, and then Complesso Fontana Terni. We saw, I think, some images at the beginning. I don't know. I think it's the same fountain, another house. Sorry, no pictures. Here is another house, which I don't know if he built, but I like the drawing, but the resolution is not easily acceptable. No, he built it. He built it, and I'm sorry, I don't. This is another very interesting building by him, and sorry, I only have this picture, but the little I see in this picture still attracts me very much. And even this drawing, even if this drawing is not clearly defined and easily readable, they both attract me. Villa Franconi, well, it's called Villa, but they are these two buildings. What I like about his architecture, that is local, is clearly local, it's clearly Italian, but I think it transcends localism and it becomes, for those interested in architecture, examples of good architecture, which is not just local, as we call it. And again, I like the fact that there is symmetry in his work, but there is also asymmetry, like in this elevation. You have this loggia here, which breaks the, there is a slight asymmetry, but in this case, not so slight, but the building could have been totally symmetrical, and it's not. And I like this very much, symmetry and asymmetry. Again, the craft of erecting a wall, a masonry wall. Otherwise, the plans are, nothing spectacular about them, but well, this rendering is also not very spectacular. Another house in Terni, apartment building, actually. I guess he built a lot in Terni. This is another house, Casa Lucioni. This one we saw already a picture, but I only have this one, and I apologize. Another house, private house, Mario Ridolfi. Now, I think this is the last work I show by him. It's the school, Scuola Media Leonardo da Vinci, nothing less, in Terni, 1952-1961. So 1952, 1961, just a few years after the Second World War. Of course, we couldn't expect flamboyant, architectural flamboyance. I think he employed materials very well. You know, you have the concrete structure, you know, rational as it is, or almost rationalistic, but then he employs the organic materials within the frame of the concrete frame, and brings texture, tactility to the building, which does matter. And then he has these parapets with ornamental design, which you could say they are nostalgic. Okay, nostalgia or nostalgia animated also Andrei Tarkovsky when he made his beautiful film in Italy. Nostalgia is not always something we should throw stones at. We see here various examples of reticent porosity done in his way, and also ornamental designs. You see, they're all different. This is different from this one, from this one, from this one. So very discrete architectural gestures which create actually a sensitive facade where you wouldn't expect it. You would say, well, this is a banal building. What's so special about it? You know, it's a school. But if you look closer, you see that there are gestures towards architectonic or architectural sensitivity. And I think for this reason alone, we can applaud Mario Ridolfi. And I think his architecture could be very relevant for our time, because he employed, let's say, some technologies of let's call them modern, but also he employed local materials. He employed traditional craft. He employed discrete forms of ornament. So in that sense, his architecture is both modern and traditional. This is not easy to do, in my opinion, but he did it. That's it. So I thank you for being here.